Transfer talk around Newcastle United is ramping up ahead of the summer. 2 new players have been linked. In this video I'm going to discuss them and whether I think they'll join, and also preview the massive game at St James's Park against Chelsea on Sunday in the race for the Champions League. Let's get into it. Hello, good morning and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Welcome back to another video. Before we start, as usual, please continue to like, share and subscribe to the videos, to the channel. I've got so many big plans this summer. I know I keep saying this at the start of every video, but your support really does help in views, in likes, in subscriptions as well, particularly. I'm really looking forward to this summer. I've got so many big plans for the channel, so many big plans for my coverage of Newcastle United in general as well. Please do get involved. If you haven't already, do subscribe. Looking to get to 1,000 by the end of the season or over the summer at least. And also like the video because it really does help spread the word and get the algorithm going on YouTube to get more people viewing the videos. But we're going to get straight into the video, and as I said in the intro, transfer talk is ramping up around Newcastle as you would expect at this time of the year. Obviously Newcastle's plans will be in motion. Eddie Howe has been having meetings with Paul Mitchell and Darren Eales and everybody who's relevant to that sort of situation, but ultimately Newcastle know that they have to qualify for the Champions League to get the most out of the transfer window, and they can't really make concrete plans until they know which competition in Europe they're going to be playing in. Obviously they've already guaranteed the Conference League. Europa League looks extremely likely too, but Newcastle are very much in the race for the Champions League. As we know, they've very much got that in their own hands, and 2 wins in the 2 remaining home games should be enough, but we'll talk about that, as I say, in a bit. First of all, I want to mention Tyler Dibling. He's come back into the fold. He's obviously been linked heavily for a long time. We've discussed him on this channel. The right winger from Southampton, 19 years old, had a really impressive season in a very poor Southampton side this year. The eye test certainly shows you what a talent this guy is, and heavily linked with Newcastle for a long time, and understandably heavily linked with a number of other clubs in England and abroad too. RB Leipzig, huge admirers. Tottenham, heavily linked as well. As I say, numerous other clubs. It's going to be very difficult for Newcastle to get Tyler Dibling in the door this summer, but as we know, they are a huge draw for young players, and they've got a track record of improving them and also getting players into the England squad. You look at Anthony Gordon, Kieran Trippier played for England before he retired, Callum Wilson the same, but more pertinently, Lewis Hall's been very much in the conversation. Tino Livramento's been very much in the conversation, and recently Dan Burn as well. But Livramento and Hall are very much in the same sort of mould as what Newcastle will be looking to do with Tyler Dibling. He's a player who's very mouldable, left-footed right winger. I can't really think of many players who fit the mould of the Eddie Howe signing more than him, in terms of he's got all the ability, he's got the experience at the top level in the Premier League. He'd be ready to contribute immediately next season. It would be a big step up to play in Europe, particularly in the Champions League, but that would also be a huge reason why he would maybe want to join the club as well. But you can just see that Eddie Howe would coach him, and Eddie Howe would work with him and get him better in terms of in front of goal. What I really like about Tyler Dibling is, 1, how direct he is, and that's something that I think Eddie Howe would really like. 2, how intelligent he is on the ball. He's always got his head up, he's always looking for the right pass. He's very good at the sort of basics of the game that I think Eddie Howe could really work with. But this one's a really tough one to do because of the number of clubs that are interested. But the reason why he's very much in the headlines this week is because there's a conversation on a podcast, I think with Jim White and Simon Jordan from a Financial Expert, who name-checked Eddie Howe off the back of Eddie Howe's comments last week about looking to expose PSR and looking to be in the position where Newcastle were vulnerable to last summer when they lost Yankuba Minter and Elliot Anderson. They're looking to do that to other clubs this summer and try and pounce on their problems, and that's why they've taken a few risks by not signing players in previous windows and building up that PSR headroom, so they're in a position to attack the window early. And Southampton were named as a team that obviously have some issues. They're going to get relegated this season. They're going to have to make sales. Tyler Dibling is the most sellable asset, but they're valuing him around 50 to 55 million by the sounds of it. They were initially valuing it at 100 million, but obviously I think that was a pie in the sky amount of money. But the trouble is, from Newcastle's perspective, that the number of clubs that are going to be interested, that will only help raise the price for Tyler Dibling, and the fact that Newcastle know how difficult Southampton are to negotiate with, having signed Tino Livramento for about £35 million, and that took a long time. He was fit, he was playing in pre-season for Southampton, getting ready for the campaign with Southampton before moving just before the season started. Livramento. Newcastle know how difficult Southampton are to deal with, but can't think of a more Eddie Howe player, if you like, than Tyler Dibling. Do I think this one's going to happen? I think I'm very sceptical because of the number of clubs who are interested, because of the fact that that will raise the price. Even in this PSR situation, even if Southampton do have to sell, I don't think they're going to make it easy. I think it has to be right for them. I would be very surprised. But this is a bigger point about the PSR situation. This is where Newcastle have taken a risk by not signing players. Obviously, they got a lot of stick last summer from me and people in the comments on this channel, and I absolutely made my case for what they should have done last summer and been a little bit smarter than they were. In January, they opted to keep their powder dry, to sell a couple of players, to sell Almiron, to sell Lloyd Kelly, who's just about to trigger that £20 million move to Juventus, which will be absolutely massive for the summer transfer window ahead. There's lots of headroom there. Newcastle can attack the window early, and that's really crucial because a number of the teams that were mentioned in this interview were Southampton, obviously with Tyler Dibling, Aston Villa and Bournemouth, who are two clubs who have lots of players that Newcastle would love to sign. Antoine Semenyo's been linked, Dean Howson obviously. Slightly different case because he's got a release clause, and he's also very similarly to Dibling, very much a wanted man, very much linked with a lot of clubs across Europe. I think that would be very difficult to do. But you look at Justin Kluivert as well, you look at Evan Nilsson, so many players that Bournemouth have that would be of interest to Newcastle if there was an opportunity to do those deals. The same with Aston Villa. I think the PSR situation for across the board is going to be very interesting. Lots of players will be very much on the radar that maybe wouldn't be otherwise because of that. Tyler Dibling, though, I think still remains a difficult one to do, and I think Newcastle are looking for a more experienced, more ready-made right midfielder if they can. Dibling, though, I think would turn heads if he was available because of the way he has impressed at Southampton, because he's stood out so much in this team that struggled so much. Russell Martin was asked about him the other week in an interview, and he said that he could go to the very top. That is very much what Eddie Howe wants in a signing. Is it really what Paul Mitchell wants? I think that's the sort of juxtaposition. He feels like a very Eddie Howe signing. Lots of the names who've been linked on the right-hand side this summer, and we'll get into plenty of them over the next few weeks, are very much more Paul Mitchell type signings. So I think this one is unlikely, but watch this space. Other possible link this week I wanted to talk about is Jonathan Tah from Bayer Leverkusen, out of contract this summer, 29 years old, centre-half. Obviously is captained Bayer Leverkusen a few times this season. Crucial player in their season last year when they won the Bundesliga under Xabi Alonso. But it doesn't look like he's going to stay there. It feels like that era at that club is coming to an end. They're at that crossroads. Xabi Alonso's likely to go to Real Madrid. Florian Wirtz may well follow him. Edmund Tapsoba's been linked with a number of clubs, including Newcastle last summer. Jonathan Tah's the one we're going to talk about today, though, because he's out of contract, and according to the Chronicle, he's been offered to Newcastle by agents. Again, this is very much just posturing. Lots of clubs are interested. Barcelona have been linked. Chelsea have been linked. Manchester United have been linked. Bayern Munich have been linked. So I think, again, this is unlikely. But in terms of a great option, and obviously his wages would be huge, and the signing on fee, the money, even though there wouldn't be a transfer fee involved, would actually go up in terms of negotiating with a player who becomes much more difficult to negotiate. We've talked about this with Jonathan David as well, who's a player that I've long suggested Newcastle should sign up front. Maybe they've missed their chance to because he's in talks with so many different clubs. The same thing was happening with Tah, but if he has been offered, if Newcastle have been offered a seat at the table, they may well look at this, because he's a very good, experienced player, Champions League experience, 29, ready to go, very tall, very versatile, can play in a back three, central of a back three for Bayer Leverkusen at the moment, but can also play the right side of the defence. He's a right-footed centre-half. He's very deceptively quick for a tall man, but he's also very good on the ball. He really does fit what Newcastle need for a centre-back in terms of someone next to Sven Botman who can offer a little bit of recovery pace, offer leadership in the middle. He's another really strong, really experienced player. He would bring a lot to the squad. If Newcastle could pull this off, I think it'd be absolutely huge. And he's a name that hasn't really been linked before. I think Newcastle are looking at younger names, a lot similarly to their right-hand side thing. They're looking for the right age profile, but Tar is somebody who I think if he came available would absolutely fit the bill. Defenders don't necessarily have to be young players. As we've seen this season with Dan Burn and Fabian Schär, they've been a brilliant partnership for much of the season, and they're both in their early 30s. You could get 4 or 5 years out of Jonathan Tah at the age of 29 with the experience he's got. He's played so many times for Germany as well. He's got everything Newcastle need, and I wouldn't be surprised if they are interested in this deal, and it becomes, similarly to Jonathan David again, more likely if they're in the Champions League. Got a much better project to sell, but I do think this one's going to be difficult because the number of clubs that are interested, the number of top clubs that are interested, will be very, very difficult to lure him to St James's Park. But let me know what you think on those two players. Would you be interested in signing those two players, given what I've just said about the context? Do you think it'll happen? Personally, I think that both are very unlikely. We'll talk about so many more names over the next few weeks, but do get in the comment section and let me know what you think on those transfer situations. But now we're going to talk about the Chelsea game on Saturday, 12 o'clock, Sunday kickoff. I will be at St James's Park. It's going to be a huge, huge occasion. Possibly the biggest league game of the season. Obviously, I think the biggest game of the season is the Wembley Cup final, which is guaranteed this season will go down in folklore anyway, but getting into the Champions League, as I've said so many times, is absolutely huge. And I can't think of a bigger stretch of massive games that the Newcastle are currently on in my lifetime, really. Maybe that's recency bias, I don't know, but since February it feels like every game is huge. I remember speaking about the Nottingham Forest game off the back of the 4-3 win at St James's Park and saying these games are absolutely huge. I said I did a whole video on them. At that time there was West Ham that they needed to win before the cup final, Brighton in the FA Cup, which would have given them further opportunities. They've done so well to win all the games at home since the cup final, but Chelsea are suddenly a different animal. They've regained their form with victories over Fulham, and that win over Liverpool I think absolutely changed the game for me. I was coming into this game backing Newcastle fully to do the job. I still do think Newcastle will do the job. I still think the atmosphere will be great. I think there's going to be one of those nervous energy games that have really made the difference for Newcastle in the Eddie Howe era. I'm thinking against PSG at home, I'm thinking against Tottenham. But it'll be difficult to generate that atmosphere because of the kickoff time. 12 o'clock on a Sunday is not ideal, let's be honest. Chelsea are a different beast now. Cole Palmer was so good against Liverpool. Romeo Lavia makes such a difference in the midfield as well. And they played really well without having the ball and without dominating possession. And I think that's a way forward for Chelsea. Maybe it isn't for Enzo Maresca. That might help Newcastle in the fact that he wants his team to dominate the ball, and that might actually suit Newcastle in this game. But Chelsea showed how effective they can be in transition. They did that at Stamford Bridge actually earlier in the season. Palmer and Nicholas Jackson gave Newcastle all sorts of issues in a victory for them. So I think that this is a really, really crucial game. Chelsea are coming into really good form. There will be a piece on Forbes looking more in detail at the game and the connotations of it and the need for Newcastle to step up a little bit in terms of the atmosphere and performance coming. That'll be on Friday, but yeah, I think this is a huge game. Winning it in the Champions League takes a massive step forward because Chelsea play Nottingham Forest, another rival, on the final day. Newcastle go to Arsenal and then have Everton. There's lots more twists and turns to come, but a victory on Sunday is absolutely huge. Let me know in the comment section below if you think that'll come. But as I say, there'll be a piece on Forbes tomorrow, a video from St James's Park after the game, and also a piece for 442 as well from St James's Park. Thanks so much for joining me. Like, share and subscribe. As I say, I've got so many big plans for this channel coming this summer. Get involved if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.